This episode of the Health Geeks Book Club podcast is brought to you by me, Sal, your financial pal. If you ever have questions or concerns about achieving your financial success or curious about what your retirement number is, give me a call and we can talk about your situation. If you're just getting started or you're down the road in retirement planning, I'm happy to help you wherever you are on your journey. Let's plan for tomorrow today. My office can be reached at 336-748-1271. I look forward to connecting with you soon. Hola, me llamo Salvador Valencia con Edward Jones, soy un asesor financiero y lo que hago yo es juntos planeamos sus metas personales y financieras. Juntos vamos a hablar sobre cómo podemos lograr sus metas y hablemos sobre cómo su dinero puede trabajar más fuerte. Si tienen preguntas en cómo se puede hacer, pueden llamarme a mi oficina al número 336-748-1271.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey, Eleanor and Tim.
Hi.
You hear that? How's that make you feel? Birds.
Relaxed.
Yeah, have you ever wondered why birdsong is so darn relaxing?
Yes.
Well, we associate the sound with alertness and safety when everything is right in the world because evolutionary birds would sing, or you don't hear the birds when something's wrong. So when the birds are singing, it's a nice safety sign, and it's also stochastic, random, and non-repeating, so our brains interpret it as this language, like a background soundtrack, and we don't have to think too hard about it. I love bird sound. It's so calming.
I'm so lucky because I wake up to bird sound, and they do sing in the morning. And
Yes.
It's the idea that maybe hearing birds make us know it's a new day and everything's okay.
I love that. So many reasons why. When I have recently turned on this music when I want to just focus and study, and it puts me in a good mood. But today we're talking about how just being outside and nature puts us in a good mood, and all the other things it does for us.
The book is called The Nature Fix. It's Why Nature Makes Us Happier, Healthier, and More Creative by Florence Williams.
Tired of feeling stuck in your health journey? At Well Balanced Nutrition, we understand that achieving your health goals isn't just about what you eat. It's about overcoming the mental roadblocks holding you back. Our team of expert nutrition coaches is here to guide you every step of the way, helping you break through mindset barriers and reach your full potential. Don't let mindset barriers stand in the way of your health and happiness. Call Well Balanced Nutrition today and start your journey to a better you.
Do you know who Florence Williams is?
No, I
She
don't.
wrote this book.
Yes, she did. And, I always like to
I
take...
win!
You would do, but I like to, start our discussions with a little bit of background on who they are and all that kind of stuff, because should we pay attention to what they have to say? She's a journalist, and I couldn't find out much about her education, except she is a Scripps Fellow for the Center of Environmental Journalism at the University of Colorado. She was a fellow at the Center for Human and Nature. She was a visiting scholar at George Washington University, and she's written some other books. Her latest book is called Heartbreak, A Personal and Scientific Journey, but her first book was called Breasts, A Natural and Unnatural History. So she's a journalist, an environmental journalist is what I would call her, and that's all I know. She's living in Washington, D.C. right now, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, we
in
get
the
to
city.
know a little bit about her throughout the book.
Oh,
but
yes.
she says that, she was frequently writing about the environment, but in a way, and how the environment hurts our health, from flame retardants, getting into human tissue, to air pollution's effect on the developing brain. Mm. So she notes that it was a pleasure to consider instead how our surroundings can also help prevent physical and mental problems and align us with the World Health Organization's definition of health.
Yeah, and so W.W. Norton and Company decided to publish her book. So once again, this is a pretty substantial independent publisher since 1923. They're very well established, and they had a vote of confidence by publishing her work, I think. It's structured in an interesting way. She's got sort of a biological intro, looking for nature neurons, and then she's got a great idea about the dosing of nature. How much nature do we need to get results? And so she's got the first 5 minutes, 5 hours a month, and then she's got some backcountry brain and then city in a garden. That's kind of the structure of her book. Very readable. Very readable. I like this book.
Yeah, I mean, so she's a journalist, so she takes you on a journey with her. She's traveling all around the world, visiting these beautiful places that I wish I could see.
Oh, yeah, she's got a great job.
Not just read about.
Yeah. She opens the book up with something that I was not familiar with. In the first line, she talks about, when I was hiking the Arches National Park, when the Mappiness app in my phone pinged me. Mappiness, what is that? It's an app. We're all into apps these days. And it's evidently an app that it's tracking where people are and how they feel.
Oh, mappiness.
Yeah.
I get it.
So they're getting a distribution geographically of where are people feeling good and where are they feeling not so good. So it's an interesting ongoing collection of data that will be interesting for someone to draw some information from. But there's the cell phone in nature, which I kind of rebel against.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do we do? Okay, so she said this is a book about nature makes us happier, healthier, and more creative. So when we're happy, she says we're happiest when we're enmeshed in community and friendships. We have our basic needs met. We have stimulated minds. We're engaged and probably in service to something greater than ourselves. That is what is our happiest state. And then the healthiest state, we would look at things, data, like biomarkers. What's our heart rate variability, our blood pressure, our hypertension, inflammation markers, and then maybe disease status if we have depression, anxiety, chronic diseases. And then creative, she moves into, I guess, philosophy and poetry and art. Mm-hmm. And so as we have this conversation, those things are going to weave through our chat, I expect, even though this is an unscripted conversation. And Kristen and I are just having some coffee, maybe. I don't know what she's having. And Tim's hanging out, responding to whatever we do.
Exactly.
It's a good time, folks.
So she kind of pings around this book. Do you like that, or did that annoy you? She goes from story to story, trip to trip, conversation.
We read another book that we met so many people in, and I was trying to think of which one that was. Do you remember? But it was
that's what this reminds me
every other chapter we met Joe at the lab and so, and then we met Robert in the lab over here, and then we went down. So it was a lot of that kind of stuff.
It was Flavor.
Yeah, Flavor.
That was the book you're talking about.
Okay, all right.
This is a similar setup.
It is, but it didn't bother me in this one as much maybe as... It's interesting in both of them. You meet a lot of interesting people. But one of the things that jumped out at me that I think has maybe motivated her into writing this, she's talking about how we're experiencing a mass generational nature amnesia that's enabled by urbanization and digital creep. And in my lifetime, I've noticed this. I grew up wandering the woods. I was not a bubble kid. We would go off for hours, trucking around, carrying pocket knives, cutting things,
Running with sticks.
Yeah, running with sticks, exactly. And maybe hacksaws and hatchets.
Walking through the treetops.
Yeah, we hang out in the treetops and all that kind of stuff. But now I see a lot of parents have their children overly engaged in structured activities and very little independent time, unsupervised, and do you know where your kid is? No, I don't. Yeah. You know where your kid is. But the other thing is she's saying, but now we're going to need professionals to help reacquaint ourselves with the woods. So there's a whole bunch of professionals now making their livelihood taking people into the woods because people have not ever been there. And soon we're going to need teachers to remind us how to converse face to face. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. And I think, so there's an unemployment rate. Forget that. We got lots of new jobs coming along. Be a guide.
it's also called nature deficit disorder.
Yes, and that book I read, that came in the book called Last Child in the Woods by
Right,
Robert
okay.
Louv. And that's an old book now. And it's taking us so long when somebody says something really important, we either don't pay attention or we haven't confronted it because it's in a book somewhere and there's just one voice saying it. But now more people are catching on. And so we read a book called Forest Bathing by Quing Lee, right?
We did, and it came up on my Facebook memories. That was 3 years ago.
Was it? Was it? And we loved that book, didn't we?
Yes.
Beautiful
It
book.
was
And just reading the
fantastic.
book was relaxing because the pictures in it,
It
were
had
absolutely
beautiful
gorgeous.
pictures.
Yeah.
Yes. So she does start the book talking about going to Japan and talking about forest bathing, but she goes beyond that. It's so much more. But I do remember in forest bathing learning the things that she highlights here in the first chapter. Or I don't know if that's the first chapter, but
Yeah. Biophilia,
biophilia. Yeah,
Yes.
what's that mean?
love of biology,
Love of nature.
life, love of life.
Yeah. About the smells of the pines and that, helping our immune system, and what's the name for forest bathing?
Shinrin Yoku.
There you
Shinrin Yoku.
There you go.
And the Koreans have a name for it too, which I thought was interesting. She was saying the Koreans have actually sort of taken over, and it's a Shamlan. Oh, I don't know how to speak Korean. Do you?
No, but in South Korea, they've got the healing forests there, and they've made these big, retreat centers.
Salim Yok.
Okay, there you
So
go.
Shinrin Yoku. Yok is Yoku in Japanese and Korean. Salim Yok. There's some similarities there.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to get to the point where they can prescribe forest bathing or forest healing, whatever they call it there. And even, the researchers are like, how can we use insurance money for this? How can we really integrate it? So they've really taken it far there.
Yeah, and she's talking about how we've given over healing to pharmaceuticals, and there's a lot of potential healing in nature, and that we're ignoring that benefit to our peril, perhaps, and to our society's peril, for sure.
So their government actually supports these initiatives, and it's part of their public health system. The parks and the healing forests. Can you imagine?
Yeah, what they say in 2008 or something, we crossed the line where more people are living in cities than in rural areas.
Okay.
There was some major milestone, and we're gravitating. They're expecting even more of us to move into cities, to urban areas. And I think that's being driven by the energy distribution models. People are saying it's more efficient to live stacked on top of ourselves, distribution of goods and services and energies. But what we're seeing, and there, she does a great job, I think, of looking at the research, like in Chicago and some of these urban centers, the Robert Taylor complex and the Ida Wells complex. What happened when we put all those housing things together and moved all of these people on top of each other? And what happened in our hospitals where, there are no windows? We're seeing that just green makes a difference in the quality of life and the hopefulness and optimism of people. And so the rise in crime and the frustration and the bad habits that come out of, these intensely dense living areas is a problem. So these Koreans have gotten kind of smart about it. And they're saying, their mayor who became, or Shanghai, the city of Shanghai is a country, right? It's a city country, Shanghai?
No, Singapore is. Shanghai is actually the
capital of...
It's a former capital, but it is a city in China.
Okay,
China.
all right. So I need to go back and read this book. It's a great book. But she's talking about one of these places where, like you were saying, the government is putting policies in where they are installing these walls of greenery and and they've looked at the park structure and access. How far from a park do you need to be to get the health benefit? I mean, they're doing all sorts of data collection and measurements on the health benefits, and they're seeing good things.
Yeah, as much as this book kind of calls out our nature deficit disorder, it's so hopeful because this information is like, these are the things that we can do to get back connected with nature. And I got to thinking, if I were to pick a different career, if I had to go back and do college over, I think it'd be so fun to be an urban planner, making, parks a thing and greenery a thing and windows and natural lighting be more of a natural thing in the cities, so that we can have these healthy so we don't make healthy living so hard for us.
Yes, there you go.
We have to fight urbanism to do what we want to do. So in Durham, we worked with this small business going in to see their employees for nutrition counseling. And they had this beautiful wall, just head to toe, full of, aquaponic plants? Just like plants. Hydroponic, thank you, yeah. Oh, it was so pretty. And then they had, of course, like a meditation, restful room, and they had lots of windows. So I'm like, if we could all do it like this, right? Set up workplaces with that. Okay.
Well, there's a lot.
Don't stop dreaming.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe in another life I can be the urban planner and designer.
It's never too late to start over.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Have you guys experienced any urban areas like that, or do you think Winston is doing a good job of keeping greenery around?
No. Well,
So there's a big
We
debate.
could do better.
actually, looking at the 7th floor of this building, we're seeing a lot of green.
We see a lot of trees.
Yeah. So
But the downtown part, I mean, we can go straight to the north of this building, directly north of this building, Marshall Park, Marshall Plaza. There are some who wanted more greenery, and it's a whole lot of concrete, but it's more accessible.
Oh.
So you have that fight, that struggle about, do you want it to be more green? Do you want it to be more accessible? Do you want it to be able to hold more people for things? And I'm actually all for what it is, and it's a lot of concrete. But I don't mind green spaces either. There's another.
you don't mind them.
Well, no, I mean I'm equal footing on what those are, and Eleanor was telling me about a little thing she's doing with her grandsons is about the historical markers, and there's one over here on 2nd Street at a park that at one time that park was not a good place to be, but now they have turned that into a green space with benches and all that stuff. This town has plenty of green spaces, but you have to look for them.
Well, and I think that's
Downtown.
that's where we could do better, is showing people and leading them to these places and making them more attractive and promoting them, basically.
And the conversation she has here, and these other research people are saying, it's what is the proximity? How much time does it take you to get to the green? And is it 10 minutes, or is it a walk, a drive, whatever? When my first reaction to your question, Winston-Salem, I'm thinking Clemens, which is a suburb.
Right.
And out in the suburbs of Winston-Salem, there's a lot of development going on. And there are a lot of agricultural lands and properties that are being purchased because there's some indication that from Raleigh to Charlotte is going to be the next Dallas to Houston corridor. They've been saying that for about 20 years, and now we're seeing the highways go in to maybe support that additional population so that when it comes, we can get the cars moving, if anybody has a car then, which could change. But we're investing a lot in highway construction here. And I get heartbroken because they just plow these trees down, and all that red clay is running into the waterways. And it's like, where did this, nobody cares about snakes. They care about dogs and puppies and deer maybe, but, turtles and amphibians and some of the lower on the pole, the habitats are gone. And so you're breaking the ecosystem. And I could go on, so let me stop. But anyway, I think we, in this area, if some of us got better educated and could figure out how to make the money, because that's what drives a lot of this stuff, is profit, which is not a bad thing. But there can be profits with this kind of biophilia, nature understanding that will serve us better and make us happier as a community, maybe reduce the violence, reduce the dissatisfaction, the depression, and the job loss due to these situations where you just can't get to work because you feel bad, that kind of a thing. That's my dream.
Yeah.
For our town.
Well, and we're in North Carolina, so we can easily go beach, mountain. There's lots of places, but it's not till the back, so I'm kind of skipping ahead, but there's this pyramid, kind of a lot like the food pyramid.
Let's talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, where, at the base, to be healthy
this is the nature
and happy,
dosing.
The nature dosing,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. Just like the food pyramid, although we don't use that anymore, and there's, I could go on about it. But
so we need a nature plate.
the nature plate, so the right dosing that we need on a daily basis is the bottom, and we need
It's interaction every day.
Hourly exposure to sunlight and green and being outside. So that daily dose as much as you can. And then it goes up to weekly kind of visiting parks in your area. You might have to drive to these. So it's kind of like walking distance, then driving distance.
Yeah, so in my area, we have Tanglewood Park, which is a drive for me. But I should drive out there 1 hour a week.
Right, yeah.
And spend an hour.
And spend an hour out there.
Yeah, intense 1 hour. At a minimum.
Immerse yourself in it, yes.
But that's the second level.
And then up, is it monthly? And this is kind of more like...
Take a weekend.
Like
you
a
take
weekend
a weekend
at a lake or go camping.
Right.
Okay.
Sort of, more than just an hour. You're going to be there for a long time. And then yearly, the idea is to have an intense multiple day experience. Like go hike to Mount LeConte or go out west and truck along the
Not
desert.
a single bit of that sounds interesting to me. Because I hate being outside. I hate it.
Well, now you could be one of those people. There's maybe 20% or 10% of the population that does not respond to nature.
I'm an anomaly.
It's 15%. Yeah.
Does not respond.
I can kind of relate, Tim, because I am drawn towards people who love nature because I benefit from it.
Yes.
But if I'm left to my own devices, I'm not one to be like, let's go on an adventure. I want someone to go with me because the first time I went backpacking with my husband and we stayed in a tent, I kid you not.
And he comes from a camping family, doesn't he?
Yes.
They're
I'm
out.
like, my flashlight, what was that noise? Every time the leaves were crunching, I kept him up all night. I do not necessarily feel calm naturally in all outdoor environments. Luckily, we've upgraded to a camper, so I'm a lot happier.
This author is kind of like you guys, I think, because she said that she's not a responder to some of this stuff either because she tries to figure it all
That's
out in her
right.
head.
Some of the things stress her out more than calm her down.
And so she didn't fit the model very well, which I thought was interesting. And she does participate in all this data collection. They put electrodes all over her head in all these different places. And she talks about the experiments that are going on to see, is it real or is it just an idea that we like nature and it's healthy? Does it really give us benefits or not? So people are exploring that scientifically.
Right.
And she talks about all those studies in here, and they are kind of fun to talk about. You go these places and you get a pre-event assessment. You put your arm in the machine, you get your brain scanned, and then you go do the thing, and then you come back and get it done again, and they have a before and after comparison in groups, and it's fascinating.
It is very interesting. They're taking your saliva to test your cortisol. They're testing your blood sugar or blood pressure before and after,
and heart rate variability.
Yes.
So
scanning your brain, and then sometimes just more like subjective. How are you feeling? What are you worrying about?
Stephanie, my wife, she does respond well to these things. not right now because her grass is high and needs to be cut. But she likes to go sit out there and read her books or whatever. Every Sunday, unless it's pouring down rain, she goes to Renolda Gardens here in Winston and walks for an hour, sometimes 2.
She's doing her thing. She's
Yeah.
getting her weekly dose. This
There
is
you
good.
go, yeah.
And it keeps her happy, right?
It does.
That's good for you.
It's good for me when
Yes,
she's
that's
happy.
good for- yes, they're really good. I like that dosing schedule. I think that was an interesting thing that I'd not seen before because it kind of gives you something to shoot for if you want
Exactly.
to try.
Yeah.
It clarifies that. Hey, if you're as interested in prevention as I am, contact me, Eleanor Russell, at 360health, number 4, letter U.com. Whether you're interested in financial wellness or physical health products, 360 Health invites you to become part of our community. She talks about Wordsworth and Emerson and all these things that they said in their poetry, and it's beautiful to read. She reminds us of that. If you've never read those things, it's lovely. But then she talks about Jackson Pollock, and I'm going, huh? He's the artist that really flashed the art community with abstract and non-controlled abstract. But it turns out his art has this thing called fractals, which a lot of us have heard about. And this idea of this mathematical underpinning of fractals showing up in his artwork is one of the reasons that we like his art. And then when we look at a raindrop hitting water, or we look at ferns, there's all sorts of things in nature that are using this fractal math that we respond to.
Yeah.
It soothes us, and snowflakes. All these things that look like random, they're not. Did you get to that?
I kind of skimmed over that. It didn't really stick with me a lot, but
So in that conversation of the fractals, he's talking about if we gave this information to architects and artists so they can integrate it into a variety of their works, then we might be able to make these cities better, like we're talking about. Stress reduction is triggered by physiological resonance that occurs when the fractal structure of the eye matches the fractal image being viewed. Okay, stress reduction is something that we're seeking, right? A lot of us are overstressed. And I love that they're using the word resonance instead of congruence, because it's the same word Beethoven used to describe how he felt when he left the confines of Vienna for the country. He said, "How happy I am to be able to walk among the shrubs, the trees, the woods, the grass, and the rocks. For the woods, the trees, and the rocks give man the resonance he needs." Long before fractals, Beethoven intuited a powerful alignment of the senses and surroundings. And so what we've done with our architecture is, as we increasingly surround ourselves with straight Euclidean-built environments, which is what our buildings are, straight lines, right? We surround ourselves with that, we risk losing our connection to the natural stress reducer that is visual fluency. And I find that very interesting. And that's why these sides of buildings with plants on them and things like that can soften that Euclidean line. And how cool is that? I mean, I just think that's cool.
I mean,
Music.
it just makes me want to be an urban planner.
Don't you want to hear the birds chirp?
I do.
We were running into this.
There you go.
Thank you. We're running into the thing about, he said something in there, too, that made me think of something else. I always learn something in these books, which I think is so much fun. Another reason
That's
we
why
should all
do
read.
it. Or listen to us so we can share what we've learned with you.
Yeah, and maybe you'll go find out if I'm telling you the truth or not. Do you know who Mesmer was?
He did all the izing, right? Mesmerizing.
That's exactly who is mesmerizing. And they thought he was a quack because he was saying that there's a connection between animate and inanimate objects. And people thought that's nuts. I cannot relate to a stone. Well, in this discourse, I think she has resurrected Mesmer and has said that maybe he's got something going on, because in this idea of when we're really, really off the deep end in distress, we don't like to be around people sometimes. People are agitating, and and if they are near us, then explosions can happen, emotional explosions. So what one of these people figured out was, and I see if I can find that because it was pretty cool.
I remember him. He could be in nature amongst the rocks.
Yeah. And the idea is the stone. Here we go. I'm going to find it. Yeah. It was as though the stone spoke to him, and the stone was very comforting. And I've had that experience on a trail, sitting on a big rock outcropping by myself, looking over some vista. In West Virginia, we have those. I think we have them here in North Carolina too. But it is something powerful in that connection with the earth, the rock. I mean, the rock comes out of the center of the earth, and it's just like, this is us. So anyway, I get that. But then it seems like we can move, as though the rock spoke to him, I have been here forever and I will always be here. My entire value lies in my existence, and whatever you are or do is of no concern to me. So I can relate.
Who said this? This is the stone.
Yeah, the stone said that. No, this is a more recent fellow who was kind of picking back up that idea. But then you find that the feelings calmed him, filled him with harmony. His own situation became less important. The stone had been there long before the first human had ever walked past. And as he got better, he turned his attention to the ocean waves and then gradually to the vegetation, particularly the oak trees. Because a lot of us talk about trees meaning something to us and that we can feel really good in forest bathing when we go touch a tree and sit under a tree and breathe the endorphins and enjoy the oxygen and all the good things in the woods. But some of us maybe need to start with something less complicated.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's the same chapter, but I really enjoyed how she went into awe and how...
We read a book on awe, didn't we?
We did. I liked her chapter better than that book, sorry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But she talks about, spirituality going beyond religion, and that being in nature can be like spirituality and that awe, and it's just, we're amazed by the vastness of nature, and it can remind us, like, get over yourself, right? Like, perspective. This tree has been here for centuries, and I'm worried about what so-and-so said about me yesterday or whatever. You know what I mean?
Which is what a lot of people tell me about the ocean. When they get to the ocean, they feel like,
yes.
I am so little compared to this vast body of water, what other grains of sand and all that's going on.
And so, even looking up at a tree versus looking up at a building, speaking of that.
Yeah, they did a comparison study on that, didn't they? The eucalyptus trees.
Just a small little study. I don't know how many people.
It was 5 minutes or something. It was a short amount of time.
But they took them out to look up at a building or a tree for 5 minutes, and then
measured them.
They accidentally had somebody drop some pens, but it was on cue, right? But it was an accident. And the people looking at the tree were more generous and opted to help pick up the pens, versus the group that looked at the building were less likely to help out.
Right.
So 5 minutes of looking at a tree, and we can just be better humans.
Right.
How easy is that?
Well, that's why she's saying it's important to get these nature doses.
Information
and
out.
she talks about accidental doses where you don't intend to get green, but you see it. And I'm lucky enough to live in a house that every window of mine, I walk by, I see green.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would notice this morning I was taking my shower and I went, I just got an accidental dose of nature, because I looked out there and I did take a minute. The sun is hitting that leaf. It's so beautiful. It was just a little short acknowledgement, but I got a benefit from that. I know I did. And I am very fortunate because I do have that. Driving in here, I came down these lush green roads. Speaking of Winston-Salem in this area, my son always talks about when he comes home, gosh, this place is so green, just the town. So he feels it driving in here and notices it. And I remember going back to West Virginia and feeling that same thing. It was like, boy, it's so humid up here. Look at all these trees. In the summertime, it was really warm and sticky.
Yeah.
But green and rocky. Just a lot of beautiful nature. And they've just put a new national park. Our newest national park is up there at the New River Gorge. And it's a beautiful place. A lot of green. And that's one of the things she talks about is how do we in the United States, we don't have as much protected land. we're losing it, and we have a movement here. The Piedmont Land Conservancy is doing a really nice job for us, encouraging people to protect land from development and give it to this conservancy. And I think they just announced another new park last
127 acres.
Yes, where is it? Do you know?
I don't.
Well,
Hold on.
I want to go over there. That's it's exciting for us because as we said, we are paying attention in our town to maybe preserving what we can before it's too late. This thing about hospitals, when I was in there in that area where we're talking about the stone, the ocean waves, and the trees, and feeling from sick to well, when you're in the hospital, you don't feel good. And they've done studies that people who have green views heal faster. They get better quicker.
Yeah, I remember that from, I think, forest bathing, where, it could even be a picture.
Yeah. This fella, she was over in Sweden, I think, and she went to look at this fella, Ottoson, who has Parkinson's disease, but he continues to rely on his assistants for reading and writing, so the guy's still active. And he gives talks all over Sweden and is amazed by how many people tell him similar stories of recovery in nature. But it pains him that the modern medical establishment has largely forgotten the insights of Rush and Searles, who were a couple of guys that showed that this was a benefit years ago. When you built a hospital 100 years ago, you built it around a nice park. That was self-evident. But after about 1930 or 1940, man is treated like a machine. He gets energy and medicine, and that's all. We are just now starting to get our fuller knowledge back. And I remember working at our medical center here. We had a wonderful groundskeeper who was always out, putting some fresh shrubs or blooms in the ground. And people would get so upset that we were spending money on that. And I was sitting there going, what are you talking about? People walking into this place get a dose of, and I didn't realize what they were getting, but a dose of nature to, help them as they confront these difficult situations. Either their loved ones are sick or they're going in for a procedure that they don't know is going to help or not, but they're going to submit to it. And this book tells me we should pay more and more attention to that. So I think they are building hospitals now with views and courtyards in the internal areas and places that patients can see greenery.
Nice.
Even Florence Nightingale was working, back in the Civil War? Is that when she was Florence Nightingale?
Not sure.
The Crimean War or something like that. But she noticed that when she took her patients outside and gave them sunlight and fresh air, they did better.
Right.
So why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is good to talk about it because
Yeah.
I think it encourages us to do more of those things.
It was the Crimean War. I got it. Finally dug that out.
And the conservancy is in the Pofftown area.
Oh, good.
This episode of the Health Geeks Book Club podcast is brought to you by me, Sal, your financial pal. If you ever have questions or concerns about achieving your financial success or curious about what your retirement number is, give me a call and we can talk about your situation. If you're just getting started or you're down the road in retirement planning, I'm happy to help you wherever you are on your journey. Let's plan for tomorrow today. My office can be reached at 336-748-1271. I look forward to connecting with you soon. Hola, me llamo Salvador Valencia con Edward Jones, soy un asesor financiero y lo que hago yo es juntos planeamos sus metas personales y financieras. Juntos vamos a hablar sobre cómo podemos lograr sus metas y hablemos sobre cómo su dinero puede trabajar más fuerte. Si tienen preguntas en cómo se puede hacer, pueden llamarme a mi oficina al número 336-748-1271.
I like how she answers questions in the book, like, is it helpful to walk in a city park even if there's noise around, or is it helpful to walk in groups, or do we need to walk solo? So the whole should I walk in groups, they looked at the research, and if you're depressed or anxious, social walking in nature will boost your mood, assuming you're walking with people you like.
Qualifier.
But if you want to solve problems in life, self-reflect, and jolt your creativity, it's better to go alone in a safe place. And then also noting to put your phone away when you're in nature, because that can take away from the experience, right? You're not immersed.
No. You said that solving your problems, that Salvatore ambulando is something that I ran into with walking labyrinths. Labyrinths are a sort of a pattern that you can walk, and the idea is that if you walk this thing, the problem will solve itself, and you can lay these problems down in the center of the labyrinth and walk back out without them. It's a really interesting patterned walk. So the other thing they came up with was rambling versus hiking. And I thought, Tim's going to like rambling. Rambling involves drinking.
Yes.
So you go for a day hike and then you go have a nice drink, and just you enjoy the benefits of the exercise and the outside and then the camaraderie of the social drink. Whereas hiking, she qualifies that as backpack overnight. You're on a serious hike. And I'm wondering, there's so much attention to these watches and the steps we take, and this obsession of getting your steps in, and that's the whole focus of it, is I got to get the steps. I got to get the steps. And that maybe we're missing something by paying attention to that instead of just, I'm out here walking.
Right.
Who cares how many steps I take?
Being present and
I'm going to be out here for an hour. I'm going to be out here for an hour, and that's good for me. But I was approached, someone asked me if I would like to go on some sort of a hike in October. It's going to be about a 10-mile hike for some charity or something. But we're going to have to get in condition and do all this stuff to do it. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. Maybe. But the
I
hike,
can give you my answer right now.
Yeah.
No.
Even if there's not a nice
No.
at the end.
I don't care what the reward is. I've done that, and no.
Well, we talked about how nature is dose dependent, right? In the pyramid, like little bits are helpful. The more you get, the better. But also, we're just from this conversation learning that it's a very personal. It's person to person. But she also brings up kind of like caffeine, right? If you can get used to caffeine, the more you need to feel that jolt. Well, nature can be the same way. Someone who lives in a city might be overjoyed and calmed down by a single tree, but others might require a bigger hit. So she was moving from Boulder, Colorado to Washington, D.C., and
my heart
she
broke
was
for her.
Really feeling depressed about the lack of nature that she was, even though D.C. has pretty parks.
Yeah, but she
trees
said from the sky, you look down, D.C. really actually does have a lot, except she said there's a line. And the south side of D.C. may be less rich.
Okay.
And she said it's bare. But the wealthy side is well vegetated, which is another thing many of these researchers did comment on. Where there's money, there's usually green.
Right. I did note,
and that's not currency, that's nature. Nature green.
That if you have money, you're more likely to go out and vacation. But they also were able to find some research that says even the poor groups that had more exposure to green were happier.
Oh, yeah.
When they, solved it for how much money they had.
Yes.
I'm not saying that eloquently. Sorry.
Independent of their income.
Yes, thank you. Goodness gracious. Y'all know what I mean.
Okay, I read another book called The Devil in the White City, which was really interesting about Chicago, and it was about the World's Fair that was held there in the late 1890s, and the Ferris wheel and all these wonderful things came out of it. But there was an architect.
The hot dog. The hot dog,
Oh,
too,
really?
right?
Okay, the hot dog and juicy fruit and shredded wheat and all sorts of things. But Olmsted was the landscape architect that helped design that. And what Chicago was trying to do was outbeat New York and Paris, because Paris had done the Eiffel Tower. And so Chicago was trying to establish themselves. And I believe they just had a big fire in Chicago, maybe. So they were rebuilding and redesigning that metropolis. And Olmsted was, like I said, the landscape architect. And it was late in his career that helped do that. Well, in this book, she keeps talking about Olmsted. And I'm a big fan of Olmsted. And if you go towards Raleigh in North Carolina, there's the William B. Olmsted State Park.
Oh, yeah.
So he was very big here in North Carolina and did the Vanderbilt Estates grounds and all those sorts of things. And his premise was people need to be connected to nature. And he was trying to elevate landscape architecture to an art form, which it really is when you think about it.
Yeah.
And his idea was it doesn't need to be formal gardens. It needs to be more natural, twiny, just indigenous type of stuff, but designed. And Ulrich was another landscape architect, and he had the hypothesis that nature causes a rapid emotional response. And that's what we just kind of had with our bird chirps for me.
Yeah.
And it happens at a subconscious level. And that's why it's important that we need not always to know that things are happening. At the subconscious level, we're responding.
Right.
And so if we have a lot of concrete, a lot of straight lines, a lot of people on top of each other, the prediction is that we're, like she said, we're experiencing a mass generational amnesia. We don't know what it's like to be connected to nature. And we are natural beings. We are very much connected. He just moved my microphone. I'm sorry.
And nature makes us more human. Yeah. You mentioned in the beginning that you have fond memories of like roaming around outside, and I do too.
I'm a biologist. Remember?
I remember naming a tree and a rock, and it was me and my cousin had it as our like hangout spot, and we noticed that it's harder for kids to come up with that. But she has a whole chapter on kids and how,
kindergarten.
We're making them sit in a chair with school. And we can go down that rabbit hole, but I kind of want to talk about some really cool, hopeful things that are happening. Mm-hmm. The first thing that I really liked is how she called out that kids with ADHD are actually the ones evolutionary that would go and explore new places and take risks and do things. And yet, in the way they're seen in schools, they're a problem because they can't sit there. But really, what if it's what we need for these kids that have this exploratory and wild side to them? Isn't that a nice, refreshing way to look at it?
Oh, I think so. I think
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. She talks about this school in Scotland, which I loved reading this. Mm-hmm. Kids ran happily around climbing trees, playing house in twig teepees, hosting a funeral for a dead frog. School's director is a big fan of kids and fire. How many times do you say, "Don't touch it, don't start a fire"? So she's also a proponent of preschoolers handling knives and challenging themselves physically. She told me how after a large tree fell over during a storm, the children had spent the day sawing and pounding the sharp bits to make it safe to climb on. This, she explained, launched a typical nature-based curriculum. The kids improved their manual dexterity, learned the cause and effect, and practical teamwork. Yeah, there's a movement for nature schooling, but it's not funded by the public education system.
Right.
And I have a fellow that does landscape work, and his partner is a nature preschool teacher. And I've been trying to meet this gal, and I was hoping I'd get her in on this conversation. So maybe one day we'll get her input. But there's somebody here in this community that's doing a nature-based program where they're outside.
Yes. It's called, the one I know of is called Piedmont Forest School, and it is an outdoor school here in Winston-Salem.
Oh, wow. Have you visited it? Mm-mm. Well, sort of at the end of this thing, she's talking about the reason that we don't do the outside stuff and kids have very little recess anymore is because it's dirty, and it tracks mud into the halls, and so it becomes a janitorial problem. And so to benefit the janitor, not the kids, we don't have recess. And she says, maybe we just need more wellies. Which I thought, oh, yes, I like that. Little row of little boots at the front door of the schools for everybody to hop into those and run outside.
Yeah, and I think it's also a problem with how much we're expecting of the teachers to get across to the students. So if they haven't met this objective yet, then they've got to stay inside and get this accomplished before they can go out and play, because that's more important for your testing and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and they say that some of these schools in these other countries don't even start some of the what we would call intellectual studies until they're 8 or 9.
Yeah.
You know, but what statistics alarms me is the stats are alarming. Preschoolers are the fastest growing market for antidepressants in the United States. More than 10,000 American preschoolers are being medicated for ADHD. Teenagers today have 5 to 8 times more clinically significant scores for anxiety and depression compared to young people born in the 50s, which is me. Since 1999, the U.S. suicide rate has increased for nearly all groups, with the steepest rise, 200%, among girls 10 to 14 years old. This is alarming. We need to get these kids outside.
Well, and there's opportunities, right? I agree. It is alarming. And my kids went to preschools that were either said Montessori or they basically acted like Montessori school without calling it one. But, they prioritize outdoor play, child-led play, not overly structured things. You would send them home, or you would send them in one outfit and they might come home in another because they got so dirty, which was good. It was just part of what to expect. And I loved that for them. But I think the main issue is not that these things exist, but like you said, they're not publicly funded. So this outdoor school they talked about in the book, the Academy at SOAR, she mentions it's $49,500 per year for tuition.
Yeah. But she says that's in par with other boarding schools.
Oh, yeah, but it's like...
Who can afford it?
Yeah, it's not accessible for everybody. I think that's the main issue.
Well, did we talk about art? Attention restoration theory? Because that was one of her big things in here. And that was in that area where we were just talking about the kids with ADHD. It says in a 2004 paper... Andrea Taylor proposed an explanation for how attention restoration theory, ART, might apply. The right prefrontal cortex, the brain's organizing, judging, task-focusing real estate, is known to be less active in children with ADHD. If nature allows the right prefrontal cortex to recharge, it could boost attention in these kids. And so that's why it's important for them. They can't sit in their chairs. They don't want to sit in their chair. And when they get outside, they're much better.
Yeah.
And that's something going on in their brains.
Yeah.
Real.
Well, she has a hopeful kind of call to action in the end. The access to nature movement also ideally needs to grow out of schools, churches, workplaces, neighborhood associations, and cities as a whole. Until we fully acknowledge the need for nature that's driving some of our behavior, we won't work to make it available for everyone. So that makes me just feel good that we're reading this, we're talking about this, because this book isn't new per se. Like, we've read books that were just in the past year. I think this one was 2017, right?
Oh, we didn't talk about that, do we? Yeah. I don't know.
But anyways, so she says, I'm heartened by the small bursts of activism taking place in communities throughout the country, whether through fun and innovating groups like Outdoor Afro, Girl Tech, City Kids, Nature Bridge, the Children in Nature Network, and dozens of others. And then she mentions Healthy Parks, Healthy People initiative in the U.S., which is fantastic, and then the nonprofit Trust for Public Land, who recently compiled a helpful park score index ranking every major U.S. city. And then if you're a fourth grader in the United States, you get in free to all of the national parks.
Yes, that's cool. Before we get off this book, my favorite chapter in here was the one about water. She had...
Oh, yes.
I think it was water, yeah. Water on the brain. And this is the story that she tells about adult veterans. Well, they would all be adults, wouldn't they? Veterans would be adults, yes. Suffering either military sexual trauma or PTSD, combat related. And they took these women out on this gorge river run. Some of them had arms, some of them didn't. Some of them had canes, some of them had service dogs. Some of them, it was a very interesting mix of women. And I loved reading their stories and hearing what happened to them as they experienced this intense, and it was tough,
like
river
run.
Rafting. Yeah. And getting bumped out of their kayaks. Dangerous. And the response they had to that was so hopeful that you just wish every one of these soldiers that's suffering these kinds of things would have the opportunity to experience these programs. The evidence looks very compelling to me that it would be fabulous. And so when you read the book, I hope you will enjoy that chapter. It was very, very moving to me.
Yeah, because I like how she laid out that, just for our everyday stressed out selves, a little bit of nature is helpful. But then she dives in, even with PTSD and intense things. I mean, we might need a longer duration in nature for it to be helpful.
Right.
But it's helpful, and these programs are out there, which is exciting. I hope we can see more and more of them.
Yeah, and there are employment opportunities, too. People are choosing to study these programs. There are degrees now in credentialing to help the people work with folks who are grieving their lost selves, which is what was happening to these women in particular. It was just an amazing story. I would say the take-home message for me, though, out of this book was go outside often, sometimes in wild places, bring friends or not, and breathe. I mean, it's not complicated. Another one of the things was get married, get a job, and live near the coast. Those seem to be good advice, too. But our cities are human zoos, and so are our schools. I think we need to really have some good conversations about how do we fix this? And so here she's got the nature fix.
That's right. Little and big ways that we can make an impact and get connected to nature again. Now, I'm Kristen Norton with Well Balanced Nutrition, where we offer nutrition coaching from registered dietitians, one-on-one, virtual, and in person if you're in the area. We invite you to visit our website, wellbalancednutrition.com, where you can learn more about us or book a free clarity call. And fun fact, even though we are a nutrition coaching program, we have longed for, and this is still on our to-do list, have a retreat center in nature, so we can have well-balanced retreats in nature, because nature's awesome.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's exciting. Well, I'm Eleanor Russell at 360health4u.com, where I like to promote prevention and strategies that help us stay healthy and build a lifestyle that promotes a rich and meaningful life. I do that with focusing on product selection that helps reduce our exposures to toxic materials, whether we put it in our body, on our body, or clean our homes with these things. So if you're interested in creating a healthy lifestyle, reach out, Eleanor Russell, 360health4u.com.
Views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.